to a Renew Education case study. We are looking at a case that is a double-double. So it's a full arch on a full arch, double-double. I don't know why I called it that. I call it double-double arch. Just came in my head. So anyway, we're only looking at the upper here, and the only trap would be that the patient keeps the lowers as is. Whenever you start with a case that is a double full arch, I typically try to have them keep one of the arches stabilized so I don't get into double trouble, which would be where I've completely lost the vertical and a lot of the dimension that I like to see maintain. I'm always trying to build the patient's mouth back to what they had, so they don't feel so foreign in terms of their vertical dimension or their bite and chewing pattern. But this patient, we have a premolar, so we can at least get some sort of premolar balanced occlusion somehow in that. If we focus on the top, get her something into play. We have some of these centrals and canines, so that when we take that impression, the lab could actually try to mimic those sizes and shapes. That would be awesome. So let's look at the treatment assessment here. This one is for skilled dentists to do a full upper arch. The light green is bone density, the yellow is the facial bone. And the only reason why I give it a yellow is because the facial bone looks really good. I'd probably normally give that a light green, except that when you put a denture over it, if you want to protect the site from collapsing, you're probably going to have to think about grafting some of the sites or relieving the denture a little bit around that facial plate so it doesn't push the facial plate into la-la land. The constriction is yellow and the sinus is an orange. The vertical dimension video is orange. I have red for the posterior support and I have a red for repeatable bite. I'm always looking at a patient when I'm interviewing them to see how they speak and how they use their mouth. I try to kind of figure out can they make things the same way, and it's very subtle, so I think that's just a training thing that I do, and I look at it, and I'm sure if we did like a deprogram or something, we can probably nail it down to get the bite corrected, and we know exactly where they want to bite. But I think she doesn't know where home is, where that bite should be. So getting an upper so that she can balance the bite with the natural lowers will allow us to improve her repeatable bite situation, improve the vertical, or to make sure that she doesn't have an intolerance to opening her bite up because it is collapsed. So anyway, let's look at the CT and let's look at the actual quality of the bone here. It looks great. Let's look at that side shot here. Here's our facial bone. We have some bone here. Here's a little bit of the constriction, like I said, but nothing harrowing. So she gets away with that. They're just straight walls, so it's not really constricted at all. I like to, green gets me when it goes more obtuse, not parallel. So let's look at that sinus area over here. And this is probably about as far back as you're going to want to go with an implant. So we have pretty good bone throughout. We do have a little bit of, getting into the floor of the sinus with that root. If we looked at this, we can measure about how much bone we would have for an implant. So I always recommend grafting first. In a multi-rooted site, to graft first, let that hold and stay, and then go back in. So you have 9 millimeters. So if you want to practice your sinus bumps, that kind of thing, put a 10 millimeter implant in there. You might bump it about 1.5 millimeters. You don't need to put graft in there. You're just pushing some of the native bone up in there, and that'll be even more stable long term for that. And you've got decent width, so you don't have to worry about that at all. So that's a great case for somebody that wants to start getting into sinus work. especially after you've grafted it. The bone is even softer. You'll have more of a simple access into, let's see, that's the wrong thing. Let's see, here we go. So let's go to the mesial root here. So you would just, if you're doing a sinus lift here, you got to remember that that bone's still going to be a little bit hard halfway down. This is where the soft bone's going to be. You want to make sure that you're just going right parallel with that facial plate, that facial wall. So when you relieve the tissue, it helps you if you relieve it at least back to here, so that you could actually see how parallel your drilling progression would be to this facial plane. So here we go. We can go over to these sites over here. You're going to do all on 6 or all on 4 or 4 locator or whatever you want to do here. This is a great case for it. So I think this is fantastic. This is not a case I'd like to do immediate stuff when I see a fenestration going on here. I don't see any bone here, and I see some bone here. You do have enough width here, but if you're going to graft one side somewhere else, then I would say maybe you graft another one where you want to put the implants. So this patient in my book will probably, I would extract all of these roots out. I would graft a couple of the sites that I want to keep, if not graft more than the ones you want to keep, just so you kind of protect the bone and things that might be fenestrated. You want to be in the canine area if you can. The canines take up a lot of space. You can see this on number 6. That we've got a facial plate here that's not too bad, and then it gets very thin. I bet there's still bone right there. It's very thin. So if you want to put an implant in there, you can always check it out. Let's do an 11.5 by 3.7. That would be plenty adequate for most things that you want to do. Now, why would you choose an all on 4 or all on 6 or 4 or 6 locator attachment? This might be the reason, because once this heals up, you're pretty much only going to do a 3.5, 3.7, maybe a 4.0 in this site, and then the next site you're going to be doing is something out over here in that first molar position. Over here in the number 3 area, we are limiting ourselves because that tooth is infected and has kind of killed the amount of bone that we would like to see. So the other side had a 9 millimeter bone. This is more like 4 or 5 millimeters of bone here. So actually it shows 6, but that's lucky if you get it that high. It's probably more like this. So 6.4, maybe you get out of that. If you graft it and you graft it up to that facial plate, maybe you'll get to keep some of that bone up to there, which would be great. And then you're looking at more like a 7 millimeters to the sinus. Here's where you can decide on putting an 8. I typically would do a 10. I would bump and do a sinus graft after the socket graft's healed. So I like the idea of putting an implant there. That's going to be a 4.2, 4.5. And like I said, I would do a 10. Let's see here. So these implants that I'm putting in are Hyosin implants. I just like using Hyosin because I know the sizes very well, and it works very well for most every case. So whatever implants that you use, that's fine. I wouldn't, I don't really care. They all have the same general shape to them overall. Let's see here. And let's center on that. So that's kind of what it would look like if you were to do that. Actually, you can do a 5. So let's change that to a 5. And a company just wrote to me, Bioconcept. They have 6 and 7 millimeter implants with, I believe, Straumann mounts and Hyosin mounts. I've used those in the past. I still use them today from time to time. They are out of China, but they are excellent implants. They do an excellent job. So if you have patience on getting them, they are FDA approved, all that stuff. Don't worry about that. And they actually work far better than any other implants that you would normally get that are the copycat or generic type of implants that are out there. So they work as well as Hyosin that I could tell that I've used. I haven't used a ton of them, but I do feel that they integrate very well. But most of them do. There are a few implant companies I would never use again. I'm not going to go through that right now. But here you can see the progression of going through this. If you're doing something fixed, then where would you do that? Maybe you would do it in the lateral, and maybe you do it in the premolar. So let's go molar, premolar, lateral, lateral, premolar, molar. You can do an all-on-6 hybrid there. If you're going to get into doing a locator type attachment, I would not do that. I would probably add the implant actually here in the premolar side here. If you want to try to even it out, then you're kind of in between and you've got this kind of odd number. I don't like implants in the anterior if you're doing a locator attachment type of system. I do like more room in the posterior because people always want to leverage off the front teeth more than they should, so the counter leverage comes from the posterior position. So as many times as you talk to a patient about, don't leverage on a locator system, use it as a tool, get used to the tool, learn what you can do with the tool, it seems to just go right over their heads, and you've got to explain it when they come back in and they go, it keeps popping out, and every time you go, what do? They go, I just bite on an apple or corn on the cob right here, ring, and then it goes, pops right out. I go, yes, that's the whole point. If you had all-on-4 and you went ring there with corn on the cob, eventually they're going to break off, and now you're really stuck taking the thing out, sending it to the lab, or doing your own repairs, and then they're not going to get rid of the habit. That's the problem. Their habits are way harder to break. I would rather have it pop off with a locator system before it breaks. So it's kind of like teaches them not to do that. It's so hard to train people with stuff like this and train them to have new habits. So that's what I would do. I would do an implant here, and if you're going to do something, if it's a locator, I put the implant here. If it's not a locator, then you're going to be doing an implant here. If you're going to try to get some fixes, you get all kinds of angled abutments. And I think the angulation looks pretty fine to me to get that 15-degree taper that you might need. And what do we say in the lateral position? You do have quite a bit of angulation that you're trying to get to their occlusion, but not so much that you can't achieve that with an angled abutment. So with that being said, that's about all she wrote. So thanks for joining us, and like us on Facebook and subscribe on our YouTube channel, and look for our broadcasting and join us or look at some more videos. I appreciate it. Thanks.